welcome to List Off. My name's Nat.
And I'm Ossie. And this week, in the first of many star-studded guest appearances and friend-studded guest appearances, we've got journalist, writer, broadcaster, and erstwhile third member of our gang, Hayley Campbell.
Hello.
Yeah. Woo. And what are we doing this week? Well, Hayley said. Hayley was like, "Oh,
Hayley suggested it.
Are you going to do like favorite rabbits because it's Easter?" I don't know if you were joking, and we were like, "Yeah, well."
I think I was out the back thinking of rabbits, and then was just listing them in my head. Offload an idea to you. Maybe you'd list them in the chat.
Do you have rabbits in your garden?
No, but
nightmare.
But they would be a nightmare. So it's one of those things. I have other tormentors in the garden. There's squirrels, no rabbits, but it is the kind of thing that my people as gardeners worry about.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem in London. I don't think rabbits. They're not hardy like a squirrel. You know what I mean? Like a squirrel will come up to you and steal your chips out of your hand.
I don't like. We had a squirrel in our house once, and it obviously got in, and then has like absolutely demolished our house. They're horrible things, horrible animals.
And yet, when they come up to my back door and look at me, I will roll them a digestive, and I could break them in half, but I prefer to roll them a whole one because then they have to push the whole thing into their gob and run off with it. Can you imagine looking out your window and seeing a squirrel running off with that? That is why they're
It's
okay.
Quite nice.
And anybody else that sees it, like a neighbour, is going to be like, "They stole it," not knowing that actually you've been like freely handing them over.
So much so that I have a rolling technique.
They have to eat constantly, squirrels.
Oh yeah.
That's all they do. Their whole purpose in life is to find food to eat and eat it. That's all they do.
Isn't yours? It's mine.
It is at the minute.
Yeah, rabbits. How did you find doing rabbit lists? I guess this is rabbits and bunnies and hares. Are we including hares?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I don't think we can't not include hares. This is your first time trying to come up with a list, Hayley. Did you find it difficult coming up with 5 favourite rabbits?
No, I didn't. But I will say I think my order is sort of nonsense. It's the order they came out, and I did move them around a bit, but there's some order, but it's I wouldn't say it's set.
I'm predicting a high level of overlap.
Oh yeah.
I would say the top 5. I'd say the top 4 was fairly easy for me, but then 5 and then tons of also ran. I think there's a lot of bad rabbits that I wouldn't. There's a lot more rabbits I don't like that I might bring up later than the ones I do. There's some I've got real beef with, I think.
I had 4 set ones, and then my 5th one kept changing.
Same. Ossie?
I don't think there'll be that much crossover with my list. I think I'm not sure. I feel like there's going to be a lot of rabbits where I'm like, oh yeah, that's obvious. I didn't think of that. Because I thought about the rabbits in my own way.
I thought there were fewer obvious rabbits than I was expecting. But we'll see. We shall see.
Right. Hayley, since you're the special guest, you should kick us off with your number 5 rabbit.
My number 5 is the were-rabbit from Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. It's actually just Wallace. That's a bit of a spoiler, actually.
Yeah, spoilers.
That is a major spoiler in the film. I love Wallace and Gromit, and I always have, and I love it because of its absurd, exaggerated Englishness. And I think the fact that the way Wallace becomes a were-rabbit is he starts this anti-pest company. They're called Anti-Pesto, but they're humane. So he's not going to kill the rabbits. So he and Gromit go out in their van and they collect all of the rabbits, and then they take them home, and he tries to turn them off vegetables by putting them in his latest invention, which is the mind manipulation omatic, to brainwash them against eating vegetables, which makes sense. And it all goes fine until he flicks a switch, and instead of it's got like a suck or blow property to it, and somehow he blows the rabbit out of the machine, and the rabbit gets stuck to his head for a moment, and that rabbit, they sort of mind meld and become each other. So that rabbit becomes Hutch. He's like a Wallace-ified rabbit, and they put him in a hutch, and it's all fine. He doesn't seem to like vegetables. He just wants cheese now, and nothing seems to have happened to Wallace. But then there's a giant monster going around eating everyone's massive marrows, and Gromit finds out that it's actually Wallace. And what I like about it is it's this mad sort of parody of classic monster movies, except it's got that absurd Englishness that Wallace and Gromit has. And, a rabbit, it's mad. And they do a transformation scene like American Werewolf in London, where Wallace has got his hands and they're stretching, but they're stretching into these big fluffy paws. And, this little puffy tail rips the arse out of his trousers. And he's still wearing Wallace's bow tie when he bounces off to eat everyone's pumpkins and stuff. It's just a mad cartoon, and I'm really into it. So he's my number 5.
That sounds good. I haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen it. I've seen the shorts. I've never seen the feature, Wallace and Gromit. Have they just done one? Or is there more than one now?
There's 2 now. There's a UFO one. There's an aliens one.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, no,
one.
that's Shaun the Sheep.
That counts, doesn't it? It's a
spin-off. That's a spin-off.
Okay. All right. I think there's 2 Shaun the Sheeps and 1 Wallace and Gromit.
It's in the same universe.
Oh, sure. It's in the Aardman extended universe.
The Gromit cinematic universe.
Yeah, sure. Well, Gromit, interestingly enough, Hayley, didn't make our top 5 dogs on either of our lists.
I know. I noticed that when I was listening. But it's all right, because Ren was the top guy, and he was always going to win. Yeah.
I'm more of a Wallace man than I am a Gromit man.
Yeah.
I like Peter Sally. He's got a lot of time for him. Got a lot of time for the man.
Shall I go next?
Go for it.
I was going to say, because I'm next, but only on my screen am I next. I don't think the order is the same on everybody's. My number 5 is comic book Samurai Rabbit Usagi Yojimbo, which, if you haven't seen it, is a great kind of kids comic, kind of 10 to 15-year-olds kind of comic. I don't know, and it's just a retelling mostly of a load of classic samurai stories. Musashi Miyamoto and kind of Lone Wolf and Cub and all these kind of tropey samurai things, but retold with a rabbit. The rabbit ties his 2 ears into a samurai top knot, and that's why he invented it. Stan Sakai, who did the comic, he created him in 1984, and it's still going now. Same guy drawing them all, had hundreds of issues, and he just drew this rabbit with a top knot, with his ears tied into a top knot, and was like, "That's it. I've got to do a rabbit samurai comic."
I wonder if he regrets it.
I don't think so. I think he's one of those really wholesome people who's been doing a kid story for like 30 something years, and it's just, I don't know, because he was a letterer before. He just did the lettering in comics, and was working on his own plans. And they're lovely looking. They all have all the characters are animals. So the bad guys are like rhinos and turtles and I don't know, other animals, and they're all dressed up as samurais, and it's very sort of straight and historical, but it's really charming and lovely to look at, and it's a nice way of dipping into a bit of classic medieval Japanese stuff and history and setting and everything, but it's all pretty wholesome and rabbity.
I will say at this point that my number 5 is also Miyamoto Usagi, the comic book rabbit. And I was reluctant to include it because I feel like, can I include that? Because I feel like I'd have to be a super fan to include it. Whereas I don't have the entire run of Usagi Yojimbo, but I have bits and pieces on it. But I kept thinking about how much I respect Stan Sakai in the comics world. I think he is one of the people I kind of respect more than I get his stuff, if you know what I mean. I think he's a super, I really like the idea of someone who's committed years and years to writing and drawing the adventures of a samurai rabbit for 30 odd years. And one of the things I really like about it is everything's so well researched, and you'll have bowls and you'll have little things where it's like, that's an actual Japanese bowl. And I like to imagine this sort of middle-aged, aging a man going to museums and sketching Japanese objects, and then to include them in an anthropomorphic rabbit story. It's almost like they're just much better than they need to be. And they're kind of for kids. I don't really think of them for kids, but they are, I guess. They're certainly all ages things. But as you say, they're super charming. And the times when I buy it is often when I hear someone rumors that they're going to stop doing that. And that's often when I go, I'm going to start getting them then. So
yeah, you do kind of want it to go on forever.
Yeah. I think it's like in the comics world, I just think he's one of the most sort of respected and sort of charming thing. And I'm not a fan of anthropomorphized animal things.
You're not furry.
I find it a bit creepy. I find it a bit weird. But I will make a big exception for Usagi Yojimbo. I think it's so well done. And yeah, as you say, it's sort of super charming and does it correctly. When I was a kid, that was the thing I kept, because he shows up in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoons. And so they did a toy of him. So you were able, as a little kid, to get a toy of this quite, obscure independent comic book character. And I always liked that you could get a Usagi Yojimbo action figure.
You still got it?
Before. I think I do. I don't know where it is, but I thought I did, but I couldn't find it. But it was something I made it was a thing I made a note to keep rather than to get rid of.
You got rid of all,
and that's it. It's almost like I sort of, when I wasn't going to include it, I sort of had these little moments of my life sort of was peppered through things where I go, I really like that samurai rabbit.
The best thing in it is when the animals die, they just have a little thought bubble of an animal skull.
That's good.
That's their last thing.
That's good. Highly recommend.
My number 4 is kind of a cheat because it's all of the suicidal rabbits in Andy Riley's Bunny Suicides cartoons. I have been writing a book recently, which is partly why I haven't seen you guys in ages, because I'm trying to keep myself trapped in a house. It's also partly
there's another reason, right?
Yeah, it's also partly the pandemic, but it's I was doing this before the pandemic. So
you've been pandemicking before.
I've been in lockdown, and writing a book is an unfun thing to do. It's a massive privilege that anyone would want to publish it. So, massively grateful to Bloomsbury, etc. Please, thank you. But I do spend 98% of my time plotting how I might get out of it, and when those plans don't work, how I might kill myself. And I think these bunnies are just truly inspirational in how they're planning to kill themselves. And I was flicking through the books before we came on here, and there's one where he's tied a noose to the minute hand of the town clock, and he's just waiting patiently beneath it to be lifted up. There's another one where he's sitting on a stool in the middle of the road, and on either side of him are two opposing shops. There's World of Knives and then Electromagnets Are Us. There's one where he's stuck his, how when you've got the DVD tray and it comes out, it's got that little hole in the middle. There's one where he's stuck his head up through the hole, and then he's reaching his little toe out to press the button to make it go in like a guillotine. It's like there are these mad Rube Goldberg contraptions that lead to their certain death, and I just love it. There's also one where it's a drawing of Noah's Ark, and all of the animals are marching onto the boat, and then there's two rabbits in front of the ark just setting out a picnic. Fuck that. So they're an inspiration to me, and they have much better ideas than I do. So
I like that what you've just done is essentially an audio book of some cartoons.
Yeah, well,
available for audible recordings.
They had to figure out how to do it.
Are they multiple bunnies, or is it one bunny who's continually thinking up these ways?
There are cartoons where there are multiple bunnies, right. So I think it's just many bunnies. A whole population of bunnies who've signed a book deal. Essentially.
Do you worry about Mr. Riley's sort of mind He sees the
Of
possibility.
course I do. He's a cartoonist.
It's fair. It's fair.
I found one of those books the other day, and I thought, oh, I'd forgotten all about this. And when I looked through it, on the cover, he has got some very high level celebrity endorsements, including one I saw from Elton John. And I thought, what is the scenario where Elton John gives you a pull quote for a book?
Yeah,
I thought very high ranking, level celebrity
I reckon
endorsements.
if a celebrity sends you a quote for the front of your book, and you're going to be like, cool, because I was going to get like, my editor's sister to do it. I think you're going to go with it. Thank you.
Maybe I was interested how it came about. I wanted to know how that came about.
Well, I'll give it a go and let you know how it comes out.
Yeah, you ask
Elton.
Ask Elton to do yours. Definitely. Yeah. Right, this one isn't going to be on your list for sure. It's not going to be a crossover because it's.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, probably it's not going to be on your list, I don't think, because it's my childhood rabbit, not my real childhood rabbit. Rest in peace, Acro, short for Acrobat. 1986 to 89.
Was it suicide or natural causes?
It was a fox.
Oh,
my guys.
Yeah, it was a fox, and I've never trusted foxes since they killed my rabbit and my guinea pig, and I was pretty upset about it. But the good thing about it was that my mum picked me up from school, and she was like, "We got to go and get some new trainers," and she was, quite serious and whatever. And we went to the shoe shop bit that was like a trainer's bit next part of Jimmy's Shoes on Essex Road back in the day. Had its own name. It was a sports shop then, but we went in there, and I was like, well, do what I always do, which would be like, I want these Nike Air Jordans, and normally my mum would look at the price and be like, no, how about these high techs, how about these Knicks, and on this occasion she went, okay.
Did you know did you know something was up at that point?
Well, when we got out to the car, and my mum was like, listen, while you were at school, I went out to the rabbit hutch, and so the rabbit died, but I got a pair of Air Jordan 5s. So I was all right. I mean, it was okay. It was an up and down day. It was a mixed day.
Yeah.
I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only time I ever got a pair of trainers like that. But it's not that rabbit anyway, because she was blind in one eye. Anyway, it's not that. It's a soft toy rabbit, a particularly crappy soft toy. It's Flat Rabbit.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, for our video viewers, is a flat. He's very flat.
Did he begin flat?
He was pretty flat. He's been slightly less than he was. It's made in Belgium by the Pop Art toy company. See the label if you watch it. And he's a flat rabbit. He looks very sad.
Yeah.
What happened to him?
I kept him when I got rid of most of my soft toys. I kept him because he just looks like he's seen some things. He has the look of like a kind of PTSD sort of half-life of a rabbit. Like he's carried on, but he's long since given up. And
was he blue and white before, or is that the brownness?
The brownness is added. The brownness is like sort of
brown love. It's been loved till it's brown. Yeah.
He's just he's pretty sad looking, but he's very loved. And when we were doing comic books, Nat, like 20 years ago, I did a strip about Flat Rabbit where he went to space in a egg-shaped spaceship. And
I always like the idea of Flat Rabbit.
Yeah, Flat Rabbit's a good guy. It's a good guy. So yeah, I immediately thought of Flat Rabbit in my top 5, but very unlikely to be on anybody else's list.
Was he always called Flat Rabbit? Did he have a different name?
I don't think he had a name as a kid. And then when I was a little bit older, like when I was like 10 or something, I'd be like, that's my Flat Rabbit, Like, I had other rabbits. I don't know if I did have other rabbits, but he was flatter than anybody else that I had. So Flat rabbit, like Flat Stanley.
You're somebody who has children. Have you ever thought about maybe after it's been in the wash, giving it to your own kids?
I've actually got some of my kids' rabbits behind me. They've got tons.
Yeah.
They do not need more rabbits. And
They've got round rabbits.
They've got round, plush, soft, nice, comforting rabbits, not this kind of shell-shocked flat rabbit with brown love on it, you know?
Stop saying brown love.
Anyway, no, the children can't have it. They can't have Flat Rabbit. He's too special. He's already traumatized. You know, he's like, do you know in Toy Story there's the wheezy penguin on the shelf that's terrified of the kid, like, please don't let them. And all the no, it's when they're all hiding under the bed from the baby in the short. Anyway, whatever. He's like that. He's retired from the child hanging out with game. You know, he's been discharged, honourable discharged.
Looks like he's got some sort of discharge in him.
Right, next, you'll go, Nat. Number 4.
My number 4 is Harvey, the invisible rabbit that may or may not exist in the mind of James Stewart in the film Harvey, who I guess that is sort of a cheat because it's hard to know whether he actually is a real rabbit or not, but he is a 6 foot or 7 foot tall rabbit who
he is 6 feet 3.5 inches. Stick to the facts.
Okay, he's a 6 foot 3.5 inch rabbit who James Stewart sees, but he's also seen as an alcoholic, and it's a strange fable of a man who is he actually happier if he just drinks himself to death? Is he happier? Is he just happier being able to see Harvey? But he's actually, that's all based on this sort of Celtic folklore. That is a sort of idea that there are these sort of anthropomorphized creatures who could be various different animals. So it sort of brings that into it. But it's a very charming film and a very charming performance of someone who you believe a rabbit is there or not. It's sort of, you know, you get that done again in things like Donnie Darko, where he can see a giant rabbit. And also, I always think it's probably an influence on something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where you have this idea of this cartoon rabbit who does actually exist in the mind of Bob Hoskins, but in that world is like a real rabbit. But I think it's sort of the originator of all those, and it's a very charming film, not least because of James Stewart, who is one of the most kind of charming and charismatic actors ever for me. And something I was looking for today, the song Turtle Power from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the first one. And because I thought it'd be funny, I did I came up with this thing for Tom Crowley, who's a friend of ours, and one of his birthdays, because the song Turtle Power by Partners in Crime is basically the entire plot from beginning to end of the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, including the bit where Shredder dies at the end. In the song that's released before the film, that gives an entire rundown of the entire plot, like a sight and sound review of a film, right?
That's the first time. That's the first time Partners in Rhyme have been compared to Sight and Sound magazine.
Well, that's part of the Venn diagram I exist in. So what I did was I did the entire plot of the movie Harvey in the style of Partners in Crime, Turtle Power, and it goes Harvey, Harvey, Harvey power, Harvey power, Harvey. Vita Louise tries to marry off Myrtle, her daughter, but thanks to Uncle Elwood, nobody will court her. They're hiding a secret so that nobody will blab it, because Elwood thinks he's friends with an invisible rabbit. That sounds bad already, but that's not really all, because the invisible rabbit Harvey is over 6 feet tall. Vita tries to have her brother Elwood committed to an asylum, but once there they meet Miss Kelly and the young Dr. Lyman. Miss Kelly's charmed by Elwood and gives her a flower, and that's because he possesses Harvey power. Harvey power. Harvey power. Harvey power. Harvey. After some confusion, Neat is committed instead, but is freed by Willie Chumley, the sanatorium's head. Now Chumley needs to commit Elwood so that he can save face, but Elwood's left already, so they all begin chase. They all find Elwood P at his favourite bar. Lyman Sanderson, as Miss Kelly, takes him back in the car. Once back at their home for the mentally ill, they're joined by the cabbie, the immortal Judge Gaffney and Will. Elwood's a gent, but with his sister seems sour, and that's because they have any Harvey power. H-A-E-V-E, still goes, H-A-R-V-E-Y power, H-A-R-V-E-Y power, H-A-R-V-E-Y Harvey. Chumley talks to Elwood alone with the greatest of insistence. He reveals he believes of Harvey's existence. Lyman Sanderson convinces Elwood to inject a serum, which would mean the invisible rabbit would go nowhere near him. The cab warns Vita that it will curb Elwood's charm, so Vita stops Dr. Lyman before it goes in his arm. Harvey's given the choice to stay with Willie or his friend, but of course he returns to Elwood in the end. There you go.
I should be like,
that's the entire plot of the movie Harvey in rhyming couplets.
That's the best rapping rabbit material since the film 8 Mile.
Ninja Turtles Harvey crossover.
That's
what a world.
It's all coming round this episode. The Ninja Turtles, Usagi,
it's come back a lot.
Harvey.
Yeah.
Oh.
Incidentally, my kids have got my youngest, who is just 4, a kid at her nursery plays Ninja Turtles, and that's all she knows about Ninja Turtles is what he says at her nursery, but she's really into it. And I played her Turtle Power, and so now she goes Turtle Power and stuff while she's jumping around. So she's a big fan of that song with no context, basically.
Yeah.
Well, all she needs to know is Raphael is the best one, and then you can move on.
Everyone's favourite.
He's the coolest guy.
I'm not sure she has any point of reference for any of them, so we could probably sell her on, Leonardo being the coolest, and she wouldn't know any better.
My number 3 is Harvey from the film Harvey. This was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was definitely going to happen. But I don't have to give you a rundown of the plot anymore because we have a
you've got to sing. You've got to sing.
You've done your own rhyming couplets.
You've got to do it.
Did you not do any of the prep?
You've got to do it in the style of a Ramones song.
Oh my goodness. Right. So Harvey, what I like about Harvey is, Mark Maron has this thing where he says, to get through all of this, you use whatever options you have at your disposal to maintain your sanity without hurting anyone. And what I like about Harvey is, put sanity aside, he's obviously quite nuts, but he's living a happy life. He's the only one in the movie who's truly happy. He's, everyone else is having a horrible, stressful time. He's just sitting around all day with a rabbit who seems nice. And he's not hurting anyone. And I like that this movie, which is charming, and it does have Jimmy Stewart in it, who is one of the all-time best dudes. It makes you wonder, would it be better if he was awake to reality like everyone else, depressed and stressed and miserable? I like the fact that at the end, they just leave him be with his rabbit because he's happy and he's not hurting anyone. It's nice.
Yeah, and that's not something that happens in films and stories and stuff. It does happen in real life. There's loads of people that you know about the place and whatever, and you're like, they're kind of mad. But they're okay. They've got their weird thing that they're doing, and
their madness is
sustaining
contained.
them, right? Yeah, like like they found their equilibrium. I don't want to do what they're doing, but they're okay, and that's good. And that very normally in a film or something, it's like, here's a problem to be solved.
I think it's also what your brain does to cope with anything, that you're constantly adapting your brain to go, okay, well, I'm going to have to deal with this now and take that on. And then you go, all right, okay, I've got to still get on with my my day now, so I'm gonna have to adapt in some way.
Yeah.
To some new scenario.
Do what you got to do.
Harvey used to always be. They used to show it on Christmas morning. It used to be one of the first things on. So it'd be on about 6 a.m. and it would either be before or after Way Out West. So it used to always be on. It's a very good. Both of them actually are very good Christmas morning movies because they're sort of like they sort of set you up well for the day.
Yeah, the Way Out West dance scene is one that I will pull up on YouTube if I'm miserable. It will definitely cheer me up no matter what's happened.
They're both good. They're now that they don't show them, they're both good Christmas fare if you want to listen to it on Christmas morning. It's a good stiffener to get you in the Christmas spirit.
Yeah, now you can just hit up YouTube for all your top wholesome clips on the day, rather than wait for ITV to program them in at 6 a.m.
You might wait a while.
Yeah. My number 3, as I'm guessing will turn up on your list, is Roger Rabbit. And I watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit again the other day because I got Disney Plus and I'm slowly watching everything on it, except for all the 90s Fox TV programs they've recently added, which I won't be watching. But I've always really liked it, and I watched it at the time, and then I watched it on TV, and for a while it was like pretty much a video in a VHS in everybody's house. Everybody's house you go out to would have Roger Rabbit, and it was just kind of everywhere. And then it wasn't everywhere for 20 years or something. It just kind of was a memory. And so I was like, I want to watch that again and see if it's as good. And it is as good. It's really good. It's a really good film, and it's like such a love letter to all of Hollywood, the Hollywood studio system, and cartoons, and all of that, and the yeah. I mean, Roger Rabbit as a main character or co-star with Bob is like totally carries his. That's a big role for a cartoon character, but it's probably not another role in a film where a cartoon character has to do that, right? Hold their own with a top actor. You can outact Michael Jordan quite easily, like you'll be all right,
Also a rabbit.
Yeah, also a rabbit. But yeah,
and also come up before Michael Jordan, the Turtles.
When did Michael Jordan come up before?
Air Jordans.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, he'd be in my top 5s of lots of things, but not nice men or rabbits. But yeah, I don't know. I'm sure you guys are going to talk about Roger Rabbit more, but fantastic bit of animation, fantastic performance, voice, just hilarious.
My number 3 is Bugs Bunny.
Sick.
The Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny. And it's funny because in a way, Bugs Bunny isn't a great rabbit. Even within the Looney Tunes pantheon, he's not the best one. But it would be insane. Oh yeah, no, he's the best rabbit.
Oh right, I was going to say
sorry,
you're picking.
I mean, like he's not the best character.
The one from Space Jam, the horribly sexy bunny, as the best one.
No, yeah, but it'd be insane not to include. And I do love Bugs Bunny cartoons, but almost I prefer the supporting cast more than I prefer Bugs himself or herself, depending on how who he's trying to attract that day.
It's very fluid.
But as the center of that universe, it'd be mad not to include him. So I love a Bugs Bunny cartoon, even though Bugs himself isn't my favorite character. He's the vessel where all the others around him come from. I much prefer Daffy Duck to Bugs Bunny. I prefer Yosemite Sam to Bugs Bunny. I prefer Wile E. Coyote to Bugs Bunny. And the Wile E. Coyote Bugs Bunny cartoon with the talking Wile E. Coyote is the greatest Bugs Bunny cartoon there is. And it's the one where he tries to sell him. He comes up and you know, he builds his own door, then knocks on it, and outside the burrow thing. But that is the greatest Bugs Bunny cartoon. So I kind of like the supporting character more than like Bugs, and like Roadrunner in that way, where Roadrunner's like a prick, but like Wile E. Coyote's the one you actually like, even though he's meant to be the bad guy. It's like that. It's one that tells you Wile E. Coyote isn't really a bad guy. Wile E. Coyote's closer to me than Bugs Bunny is. Roadrunner's a dickhead. Wile E. Coyote's like a great, like, we love him, right? He's better. He's a better guy than Roadrunner.
You
Roadrunner's
like him because he's
asshole.
a loser. He can't.
Yeah, yeah. He's a loser, and he gives up on things at the first attempt.
And he orders things from catalogs.
Yeah, he's much more like me. I can't relate to Roadrunner. But yeah, but it'd also be because of that, and because of the world that surrounds Bugs Bunny, it'd be mad, insane not to include him in my list. And you know, I like Mel Blanc. I love the Chuck Jones cartoons. But I was struggling. Like, he could almost be higher, but then you go, but then he's, even in his own world, he's not my favorite. I like the surrounding universe of the Looney Tunes characters. But in a way, Bugs isn't my favorite. So he sort of should be higher, or he should be lower. So I've put him dead in the middle.
Do you know what I like the best out of all of your list off episodes? Mm-hmm. It's the bits where you struggle, like it's an internal moral struggle about your ranking.
Like, everything in my life is a moral struggle.
I can't not have him, but should I have him higher? Or...
It'd be insane not to have him, but he can't be there.
If you're not going to take it seriously, Hayley, I don't know why you're here at all.
I'm going to stick up for Bugs more. You've done him dirty at a later bit of this show. So let's move on to Hayley's number.
My number 2 is Huge Harold from the children's book Huge Harold by Bill Peet. Are we familiar?
No.
Don't know
I don't know the
I'm
book.
going to Google it. Hold on.
Right. So Bill Peet, he did about 20, 28, something like that, children's books. He was Disney's top story guy for years and years. He started working with them when they did Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The Jungle Book was the last thing he worked on there, which is my favorite Disney movie.
He directed
I do know this book.
Stone.
I do know this book. I've just checked it.
Yeah. So he apparently had a row with Disney himself and left, and that was the end of his Disney career. But his children's books are great and weird, and Huge Harold came out in 1964, and it's about this rabbit who grows too big to be a rabbit and has to leave home and find his own way in the world. And the reason he's my number 2 rabbit is because he's me. So for the for the uninitiated, and I know you might be on a podcast so you can't see this, I'll paint the scene. I'm a giant woman. I'm absolutely massive. I'm almost as big as Harvey the rabbit. But I'm still human-sized, although I didn't feel that way when I was a kid. My mum would read me Huge Harold, and every time, you know, there's loads of pictures of him trying to, like, he has to leave home, so he's got to find somewhere to sleep, and he finds a barn, and he's trying to sleep in the barn, but his ears are poking out the windows, and his feet are poking out the door. And she'd point at the picture and she'd go, "That's you." So, so the reason he's not my number 1 is spite, really, because, you know, he's a big rabbit in my life for reasons outside of my control, and so he is a big rabbit in my life, but he's knocked off the top spot because he tormented me, really, because I imagined that I too one day would have to leave town and live in the woods because I grew too big for houses.
That's how you came to London.
And that's how I came to London.
That's your origin.
That's my origin story. So Huge Harold by Bill Peet. He did so many good ones. He did Hubert's Hair-Raising Adventure, which was about a lion who was very vain and loved his hair, and then it got burned off somehow, so he wanted to kill himself. They're all about strange animals. They're really good.
I'm gonna have to catch up with
these. I just googled it and had I've just Googled it and gone, oh yeah. I absolutely remember that, as I do a bunch of his other books that came up in the search. But yeah, very good choice. Very good rabbit.
Thank you.
Well remembered.
My number 2 is the topical one this week is the Easter Bunny. I feel like after our Easter chocolate episode, I need to give due respect to the Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny dates back to at least 17th century Germany, the Osterhase. Germans call
it all, don't they?
Germans call all rabbits hares. Like there's the German word for rabbit is like rarely used. Everything's a hare, just hares.
Do they have massive rabbits? So they just think it would be easier if they were all.
I guess they have more hares than they have rabbits. But in the same way that if we were drawing a cartoon rabbit, it'd be like, it's a cartoon rabbit. In Germany, they'd draw a cartoon hare, a hase. You know, that's just what they do. So it's like they refer to rabbits as hares. Basically, they can call them Kaninchen, which is like that's the word for rabbit. But they just call them all hares. So anyway, I'm getting off the point. And it was widely believed in like medieval times to be a hermaphrodite. You know, like it had like virgin birth rabbit that would, you know, signal the new life of spring and stuff. Anyway, but in my family, the Easter Bunny is in my family tradition. The Easter Bunny is a female bunny, and she brings the eggs for the Easter hunt and somehow liaises with the parents to make this work, because the parents have to kind of go and do some helping, right? So she's a very enigmatic character, but brings the chocolate for the little kids, and that's good. Like that's good. I'm into the chocolate bringing, as you know, and I like thinking about, like when I talk to my kids and they start to ask too many questions, and they're like, how does the Easter Bunny, how does the Easter rabbit bring the eggs? Because rabbits couldn't hold one egg, right? Let alone loads.
That's true. Point.
They're not at all well cut out for carrying things like that, right? Like, so I like when they start asking too many questions. You know, like it's a kind of magical rabbit. And my eldest asked me recently, like, is the Easter Bunny real? And I was like, you have these choices, you have these moments in parenting, you know, you get a choice. And I went, yeah, but very mysterious. Like you don't see it, you know, you don't really see them, but you've seen it. Well, I've been involved in, you know, organizing Easter hunts, but you know, it's all very, you know, and each year I'm going to get a choice. Like, is this the year I go, nah, you know, but no, for now we're holding on to the Easter rabbit's real. And I'm a big fan of a rabbit based sort of holy entity that can do magical gift bringing. I'm into it.
I didn't believe in the Easter Bunny when I was a kid, but then when I was a little kid, because I thought that sounds bogus to me. But then when I was in preschool, so I would have been about 5, it was Easter, and we came in, and so they'd done like stencils on the ground, like rabbits' footprints in flour. So they'd got like stencils out and shaken flour onto the ground. And I was like, oh, he's real now.
It's real.
Like that messed me up for like another couple of years. I was like, well, he's real because he left all those footprints.
Yeah, evidence.
In preschool. Yeah, evidence. I wanted to see evidence. They gave me evidence.
Exhibit A. You were like, I'm not going for your enigmatic rabbit that is mysterious, but if you show me some tracks,
I can still see them, and my vision of them is from like, you know, hip height, so it's like kid's eye view of these giant feet on the ground. They were big rabbit feet.
Why would they leave
big
white
ones.
tracks?
I don't know, because he's magical. He's mysterious, isn't he?
I don't have a sense of the Easter Bunny. Like, I don't know how tall he's meant to be. I couldn't tell if he's rabbit sized. He's man-sized, somewhere in between. I'm not sure. I don't have a sense of him.
Are you asking Ossie because he's a dad?
Yeah, I don't know. I've not met him.
Like I said, it's a kind of, you kind of liaise through the, you know, mind waves. You don't really get a glimpse, you know. And there's a handover.
from the evidence I saw, Nat, his feet are dinner plate sized.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I'd like to know, like, how the Easter Bunny gets all around the world to deliver eggs. Like, we know that Father Christmas does it with like reindeers, flying reindeers, right? And a sort of some sort of time bending skills. But it's not at all clear what the Easter Bunny.
He bounces,
They can run
doesn't
pretty
he?
fast.
He doesn't he like pogo around the world, something like that.
So he can jump across seas.
Yeah, he's mysterious.
Into. I'm just very grateful. I'm a very grateful, supporter of the Easter Bunny. Big fan.
Yeah, I should have given him some credit. I always feel like, in a way, the reason he didn't include him in my list is because he's sort of, to me, he's more of a like second fiddle to Santa, and I felt like I don't know if I give him his due respect.
You just said last week that you prefer Easter chocolate to,
Oh yeah, but like I mean, like as a versus Santa. I'd be like, I personally don't hold him in
way better
as
than
high
Tooth Fairy,
esteem.
Tooth Fairy's rubbish.
When we do our top 5 like mythical gift bringers,
gift givers,
you can have like the Krampus and the Christkind that they have in Germany. It's like a flying magical Christ baby that brings all the presents. Love that one. Anyways, on to the next. What's next? Nat's number 2.
My number 2 is Roger Rabbit. Again, when I was compiling my top 5, I thought I can't really have Roger Rabbit above Bugs Bunny. And then I realized I really like Roger Rabbit in a way that I don't know that I like personally Bugs Bunny. And again, I think it's a brilliant character, and one who's in a film which is bringing together all these various iconic cartoons from the previous like 40 or 50 years. You're introduced to a main character who has to hold his own amongst icons, and I think that is what they do that's so clever. And to have like Disney must have known that going in and going, we need to produce this rabbit that is going to essentially hold his own against a Bugs Bunny or something. And they got Charles Fleischer, who I remember used to promote it a lot in this country, who was the voice of Roger Rabbit, who was sent on Blue Peter and things to do a lot of the promotion. And to have that sort of insane Roger Rabbit voice that he could do at the drop of a hat. And it's the entire performance. So you get someone who is this comic and actor who can do it in person as well as mixing it with like the animation. And it's not to say like someone like Mel Blanc doesn't also do that, but it is like they have to come up with the whole character. So straight away you introduce this character you've never seen before. He's the main character of this massive movie, and almost instantly before you see him, you already have to be sold on the idea that this guy is your main guy in a world of all of the cartoons. And they do it really well. And Bob Hoskins' performance does a lot to do that as well, because he obviously completely buys into this idea of, there's not for a second do you think he's not talking to nothing. He's absolutely totally sold on the idea that he is looking at and talking to this rabbit.
But wasn't Fleischer wearing a rabbit suit on set because he like needed to get in character? I read that he would be on set.
Oh, maybe
wearing a rabbit suit, to give Hoskins something to act against, but also because he couldn't do the voice without it.
I heard a thing this week or last week that was talking about that said there's actually a scene in it where Hoskins is so good at doing the eye level thing the whole way through and looking exactly at like 3.5 foot off the ground. It's a bit like, oh, you've never really seen it done this well. Then for one scene, when they're getting into the editing room, they realize he's just stopped doing it and he's looking dead ahead. And so in the animation, it's that bit where he sort of goes right up against the wall and he puts him on tiptoes, so that on tiptoes he's eye level with Hoskins. And I went, oh, lovely.
It's lovely because they used the fact that the Roger Rabbit character is so anxious and neurotic that he might do that. He might flatten himself up against the wall so hard that he's standing on his toes. I loved that was their solution to the problem.
in character solution.
Yeah. And it was used in lots of promos, that shot. Like this fudge that they did in the animation studio became one of the most famous shots in the film.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of regular live action filmmakers would quite like to be able to sort of reanimate the people afterwards in post-production to fix mistakes, right? Like it's something you can do with animation that you can't do.
When people nowadays are very excited by Marvel films where characters meet each other, that as a kid, it was mind-blowing that Bugs Bunny was in a film with Mickey Mouse. I couldn't, but also being the kind of kid who would know why that couldn't happen.
Yeah.
To Joe, like I knew that these guys can't mix.
Yeah.
These guys can't hang out. And that was mind-blowing in that, and it's so kind of way ahead of its time. People don't talk about it in that way now. Like, and now I guess it's probably even less likely to happen because they're much more corporate entities. You know, they probably would specifically never allow Bugs Bunny to mix with a Disney character.
I think if you take the superhero example, like once the world tires of superhero films, right? That's when you're going to see Avengers versus the Justice League. You know, that's when you're going to see Superman versus Thor or something. When they're like, no one's coming anymore. We're losing money on these films. That's when they phone each other up and go, let's make a film together because otherwise this game is up. You know, like,
they're going to start doing what comics did. Just
exactly.
Mix them all
they're
up.
the same thing. Is they're going to have to be like, and so you know, I mean, I feel like that's kind of what happens with Bugs Bunny in a way. It's like, well, we've got 60 or 70 years out of these characters. We could probably afford to put them in the same film, right? But, you know, like, you know, we just have to wait longer.
I specifically remember watching that. I saw it at the Barbican when it came out. And I specifically remember that bit it's about 10 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes in the movie where Dumbo shows up at the window of the Maroon cartoons and just being that kind of like, that seems mad that Dumbo has shown up in this. So you sort of go, oh, Dumbo's in it. And it is that sort of thing where, like, I'm sure people get out of Avengers movies where there are loads of little cameos from other movies. This was like every 2 minutes, you'd just get this mad cameo.
Yeah, there's too many to see. Like in the scene at the end where they like all gather around and celebrate sort of thing and then head off into Toontown or whatever. There's like the entire history of cartoons there. You know?
Yeah, and then of course Porky Pig shows up at the end and says, "That's all, folks." And you go, "Oh, of course, Porky Pig."
And I also love all this stuff about the how movies are made, like you know, and the idea that the animations were just actors playing roles. So there was that baby who was actually an arsehole as soon as the camera stopped rolling.
It works really well.
It taught me about films when I was a kid. This is how this stuff is made. This is the camera.
It's a sweet spot for me, that kind of 40s Hollywood stuff. Anything that's set then, I find it totally romantic and get totally sucked into those worlds. And also, as well as that, it's also it appears to be in the same universe as Chinatown, which is the other thing I quite like. It makes references to like proper adult films that are a bit like, and it works really well because it is saying there's like an adult world and there's Toontown, but they're basically next door to each other.
My number one is Roger Rabbit.
Right. So this is
happened again.
On all three lists now.
On all three lists. And I love him because even with his design, like because he seems to be a combination of everybody. He's got like Mickey Mouse's shorts on, kinda. He's got his gloves. So when you're a kid and you see him for the first time, you feel like you already know him. And it's mad to me that I knew him so well and he was just in that film. I had a Roger Rabbit toy, and my mum threw him out with my Ninja Turtles. There they are again. And I think about them, my Ninja Turtles and my Roger Rabbit, they're gone. But anyway, you
had the soft toy that was about kind of that big, like kind of.
Yeah, and you could take his trousers off.
Yeah,
he didn't have like a rabbit penis or anything, but he was there. And I like him because he's got this perfect comedy timing. He's this heartbreakingly hyperactive talker, and he's got this insanely hot wife who he seems to love for her personality, and everybody else is just looking at her tits. And he's got this really strong work ethic. He's a good guy. And I like in the movie, because the movie is so aware of itself being a movie, Do you remember there's a bit where Judge Doom is going around looking for Roger, and they're in a bar, and he says, "Have you seen the rabbit?" And the guy goes, "Yeah, I seen the rabbit." And he puts his arm around this invisible guy and goes, "Well, say hello to Harvey." Like, there's a Harvey crossover.
Yeah.
There's so many ways this movie could have been bad, and it somehow ended up being amazing. Like the way they animated it by hand. Later animations that tried that hybrid live action and animation stuff doesn't work as well because they have done it on computers, so it doesn't have like a real tangible quality to it. And there was just so much work put into Roger Rabbit and making him look like he did exist. And I love that Bob Hoskins thing where he had the eye line every time except for that one scene. And of course, cartoonisty people are going to solve the problem like that. We'll just draw it like this.
Yeah.
It's great. I love everything about it.
I think there's a real myth that when people make films for kids, they think, oh, well, it doesn't really matter. It's for kids. They won't mind. Whereas I always think, when I was a kid, I asked so many questions and I was so kind of interested in the world. And if for a second there was any bit of logic that made that world unravel, I wouldn't have been able to get on with that film at all. And as you're watching it, every conceivable question that you would have as a kid watching it is answered within the film. So it's like, what, how, okay, that's how that works. That's how that works. And it's a really great film for kids because, like you say, it's sort of teaching about, it teaches you, it establishes its own universe, establishes its own rules, doesn't break them for a minute, and sort of explains things like cartoons and movie making in this way that kind of checks out with all the stuff you already know about it anyway, and just sort of adds to this sort of logic. It makes a real logical sense in this absolutely insane world. And it's so rare that any film sort of manages that. And I think especially that it's for kids, because I think they're sort of the most inquisitive people that will ever watch it.
Yeah.
And the opposite of how people often make films for kids in this incredibly cynical way. It's very uncynical movie and is sort of almost anti-cynicism.
Yeah.
And it's sort of, that's what it takes. At the end, it's Bob Hoskins' character is not allowed to be cynical and has to enter into his world for it to work. You know, he has to buy into it. Great movie.
Have either of you read any of the books?
No.
Because I always find that interesting, but not interesting enough to read the books without someone telling me they're good. Because I think there's 3 or 4 of them, which were, the first one is before the film and, like 8 years before or something. And, it's a kind of, I think it's like a kind of pulpy crime book, because it's not in the cartoon world. They're like comic strip characters, right?
Yeah, and I think he's brown. I think he's a brown rabbit.
And like it's.
Oh, that's another thing. I read that Paul Rubens did the voice on an early test of Roger Rabbit.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I haven't seen any of that anywhere, but
no, I can imagine it though. Sort of very Pee-wee's Playhouse kind of. I can see why they do that.
When I rewatched it the other week or whatever, I was amazed at how good it looks and how like much effort they put into how it looks and everything, because that it's like 89, right?
Yeah.
So that's not a golden era for animation. Like a lot of the films that come out around that time are really half-assed looking, really, it's not the high point, and it looks brilliant. It looks fantastic.
That scene where the light is someone's knocked the light, so it's swinging around, and they have to kind of change where the light source is coming from on the rabbit. That must have taken so much work if you're just drawing it.
Yeah.
And they did it so it looks like a real scene.
Yeah.
Once you know all this stuff, when you're grown up and you're no longer a kid and you're just watching it thinking, this is what's happening. When you're watching it as somebody going, how did they make this? It just seems like the most huge amount of work.
Yeah.
It does.
What's funny,
and it's sort of what we appreciate.
What's funny is being, kids and stuff when it was a big deal, when it was a huge deal when it came out, and for 5 or 10 years afterwards, in a way, it was a huge deal. And like you said, like they made Roger Rabbit be a character that suddenly sat alongside your Mickeys and your Bugs and stuff, right? and then he isn't now, and of course he isn't now, because it hasn't really been followed up. You know, they did a few little bits and bobs, but it hasn't really been followed up, and so he's not. It's, you know what I mean. He's not a character that's going to carry on being on that level. But for that time, he really was. If you were a kid in the 90s or something, you know, it was like, if someone said name a cartoon character, you might name Roger Rabbit first. You know, it's very particular to that time. Bad one. My number one is Bugs Bunny. And I think Bugs Bunny's amazing. I think Bugs Bunny, especially the early ones, when they haven't quite nailed the look down, is fantastic. And you went through all the supporting characters being better and didn't name the best one. The best one is Elmer Fudd. Elmer Fudd is the battle between Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny is like the culture wars. It's the never-ending struggle for America's soul, right? There's a super smart guy, yeah, and a bumbling cretin, and they're just winding each other up. And you were talking about Bugs Bunny like he's just kind of like some nice guy, middle of the road. He's like the biggest wind up, smart ass, and just terrorizes Elmer Fudd, or all those guys. He's just I think he's fantastic, and I think the voice work is amazing and so spare. And we didn't live through that era of kind of cinema cartoons like that, where people would be like, this 5-minute Bugs Bunny cartoon showed to millions of people around the world in the cinema and then won an Academy Award, and it'll be like 2 cartoons and he becomes a worldwide star. 10 minutes of screen time makes him a worldwide star. It's incredible. And he fought in the war. He was big propaganda warrior. You watch those, what's it, The Hair and the Hair, where he meets like Hermann Goering and Hitler, and then appears as Stalin at the end smoking a pipe. Like no one's doing that now. Like, I mean, probably a good thing that they're not enlisting our children's favorites into propaganda these days in that sort of overt way. But since it did happen, you've got to give him credit for doing his bit for the war effort there. I'm a huge Bugs Bunny fan.
Apparently, a lot of the sort of silent movie stars that would make these shorts, these 2-reeler shorts before movies, all sort of saw Bugs Bunny as being almost like, oh, right, that's what killed our careers, really, in these shorts. This is what stopped all these 2-reelers. Except for Chuck Jones, who's like, no, we did it because we love you lot. Like, it's like Chuck Jones is like a massive Buster Keaton fan. So he's like, no, we're just trying to do that. We're basically copying you. We're not trying to run you out of business.
And another thing about Bugs is that he was the first cartoon character to appear on a US postage stamp. They're very particular about what can go on a US postage stamp. Like, you can't have a living person on a US postage stamp.
Oh, really?
They have to be dead. I think you have to even be dead for an amount of time, a significant amount of time. But Bugs was the first cartoon character on one, beating Mickey Mouse.
One of the things I miss most about video shops and having to go and select your video and take it home, and if they didn't have it, you just couldn't see that film. One of the things I miss the most is just putting it on and you get your Bugs Bunny cartoon before your movie. I just took that for granted. Now, if I want to watch Bugs Bunny, I have to search him out on purpose.
Yeah, and it used to be on RTV. It used to be like, if you got up early, there'd be a bunch of Looney Tunes on, Bugs Bunny on before the main program started. They just fill any gap with them, wouldn't they? They just, if they had a bit of schedule, they just stick one in.
We're a weird country who make programs that are like 55 minutes because that's how long they took to make. So they go, we sort of gave you an hour, and they go, yeah, I made it, but it's only 53 minutes. And they go, right. And they go, put a Bugs Bunny on, put Tom and Jerry on. And it's like, and that's almost like just these weird things where you just go, and now for some reason, it's Bugs Bunny. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, it really was.
And you sit there and because Bugs Bunny, you learn and you watch about through osmosis. It just happens. Bugs Bunny is always there.
Yeah. No, I'm sticking up for Bugs Bunny. I think it's fantastic. Archetypal bunny, like eating a carrot. Like, kids now, they don't even probably see Bugs Bunny unless you went out of your way to show them. I have. But they still know, like, you get a carrot and you're like, they know how to eat a carrot like Bugs Bunny. Probably rabbits themselves have been influenced by Bugs Bunny.
Yeah.
I'm not sure rabbits ate carrots before Bugs Bunny.
I've learned from Wile E. Coyote that if a train is about to hit your house, the best thing you can do is pull the blind down. Best gag.
Who's your number one, Nat?
My number one is Fiver, the character from Watership Down. The little one. He's not the brave one. Like he's not John Hurt. Fiver is Richard Briers, and he's the one who sees that the fields are bleeding. And he's a scared rabbit who sees it all because he's got something. He's a little bit magic. But that film had such an impact on me as a kid, and you can see why. It's because it's absolutely terrifying. And all of it from the kind of Lord Thrith, the sort of sun god, and these kind of tales of, what's he called, Al-Hera, the sort of rabbit, the first rabbit. And it takes all these sort of weird sort of Blair Rabbit mythologies and makes them into this sort of essentially sort of fantastic world of something that's incredibly commonplace. But yeah, that was my big number one. I brought with me. I think it's one of those things that had such an impact on me, and it was like, I've got the Bright Eyes single. It's an Italian pressing, and
it was probably big in Italy, being big horror fans over there. They're the biggest kids film of all time in Italy.
And that was also something I found out later, that was number one the week I was born. So it does feel like in some way it's got that like weird, lots of things about it always comes back.
You were born under a folk horror sign, like it was.
Yeah.
I always liked Cowslip because he was so camp and creepy, and you couldn't tell if he was insane or evil. And he just seemed like this old lovey in the corner of a pub, making you listen to his poetry. He was the weirdest thing in a very weird film.
Yeah, well, that's because everyone in it is an old lovey.
I know.
You've got like Richard Briers doing this kind of, he's bleeding, and you've got
Denholm Elliott.
And you've got Denholm Elliott. You've got John Hurt, who sounds like he's Hazel the Rabbit, who sounds like he's got a B&H on the go while he's recording his voice. It's good. It's good stuff, and it's strong beer for kids and adults alike.
Yeah, I've told you before how terrified of all films my children are, and like especially ones with scary music, right? Like scary music and the feeling that something bad is about to happen. They're like, turn it off, and they'll just start crying, right? You're not getting through anything these days. I can't even tell you the last time we managed to get through a film. They're not going to watch Watership Down with me until they're about 35. I'm going to have to live long enough to watch Watership Down with them.
What do they call? Because they have that impending doom in the warnings sometimes. What do they call it? It's something like there's an actual warning for like feelings of terror. But
mild peril.
Mild peril.
Mild peril is like the least you can have on a DVD back, right? It will say mild peril, and that is the worst thing for my kids. What mild peril is like their kryptonite. They're just like, no, mild peril, turn it off.
I think it's odd because it was perceived as something that is quite a reassuring watch for kids as well of my generation. It was like, oh, we'll put Watership Down.
Yeah, my mum would be like, oh yeah, it's on TV. Why don't you watch Watership Down? Really nice. Okay, I'm going to go and do some work. And you'd be like coming upstairs like, Mom, this is terrifying. I'm just crying.
It's not just that. It's not just it does both. It puts things in your head which are terrifying ideas, and the ideas that there's like this sort of omens of blooded, bleeding nature,
but
also it's incredibly violent.
Yeah,
visibly, that you watch it and go, well, that's the rabbit who's just had his throat ripped out.
Yeah,
it's just things like that. It's like it's just incredibly like there's blood, and the rabbits fight each other and they scratch each other's eyes out and things. It's real like hard bit and real nature that shows, much like squirrels, that a lot of animals are bastards.
I feel it is like sort of traumatizing to the point where, you know, in the late 80s or early 90s, they brought out the Animals of Farthing Wood cartoon, which I was a bit old for, and I thought it was rubbish and boring. But the lingering dread of Watership Down gave Animals of Farthing Wood this kind of like sinister feel to me. Like anytime you're watching it again, something terrible is going to happen, and it never did really. Like it'll be like a fox stole their acorn or something. But
I don't think I've seen that one. I just assumed bad things happened.
It's rubbish. It's rubbish. But you get the sense that like it could all start bleeding. You know, like cartoon sort of English countryside is sinister.
But what if they bury the burrows where the Watership Down rabbits live, and they just can't get out and they crush each other to death? So that's a nice thought.
Yeah,
a lovely thought to leave the kids with. Let's animate that and imagine what it might look like in a weird abstract way. Yeah. And you go, oh, just horrific, absolutely horrific, but brilliant at the same time. It does feel like it teaches you stuff, and it's still, you know, it's still a U certificate film if you watch it now.
Yeah, but that's not mild peril. That's heavy peril.
It really does suggest that it is a film that has never been revisited by the BBFC. They rubber stamp that. No one has watched that again. Yeah, they've just watched it and gone, sure, what, you probably.
They remade it recently, and I think James McAvoy played Fiver. And I watched it, and it was just like a cartoon for kids. And it didn't have that thing that makes you feel sick when you're watching it. And there was none of that. It was just a story about rabbits. The same stuff happened, but it didn't have that folk horror, bizarre shit that is just all over the original Watership Down.
Run, Prince with 1,000 enemies, because if they catch you, they will kill you. That's a minute in.
Who would be into it enough to want to remake it and then leave all that stuff out? Like, what was it you liked about it? The other stuff? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Remakers.
I definitely wouldn't show your kids.
There's no chance. I mean, yeah, there's just no chance. Did you have? I wanted to give a honourable mention to a breed of real rabbits, the Flemish giant rabbit. Have you ever seen them? They're the biggest rabbits in the world. They were like bred for their fur and meat. So they just tried to make them as massive as possible, and they're like these huge, like blubbery. They're like the walruses of the rabbit world. They can be up to 1.4 meters long. Right?
What's it called? A Flemish rabbit.
Flemish giant rabbit. Yeah, and I've seen them at like a country show. You know, like that's exactly where you should see them. And they had like a collector of them, and they're like big fat dogs, you know, or small bears, you know, but with rabbit ears. But they're all sort of blubbery, and they're just huge. Like, you know, like a rabbit is only about half of its length, and then you stretch them out. When they stretch out their legs on either side, they're like huge. Like
what this rabbit looks like
dogs.
They're massive, but what they look like is, in Curse of the Were-Rabbit, the rabbit that gets stuck to Wallace's head and becomes Wallace, he becomes big. He becomes bigger than the other rabbits they've got in the other hutch. So he becomes one of these, and his name is Hutch.
That's it. He's a Flemish giant rabbit. They're kind of, they're not terrifying though at all though, because they're so sort of obese and sort of unwieldy that they lose the sprightliness of a rabbit.
They look a bit like my cat.
Did you have any more honorable mentions?
I had a very niche honorable mention to there are medieval illuminated manuscripts were cool, yeah, pretty cool guy chat. They were decorated by guys like the medieval cartoonists essentially, and sometimes they would just draw little cartoons in the margins that were not related to whatever the text was. It was just part of the decoration. And presumably no one was paying that much attention, because my dad was, he got super obsessed with this years ago. He was researching the history of humor, and he found all of these little drawings of rabbits in the margins of medieval manuscripts, and they would be little cartoons and things would happen. And they were just left there. So honorable mentions to the work of bored medieval cartoonists there. Also, I probably would have said Peter Rabbit, just because I read a lot of Peter Rabbit as a kid. Although, as I said, these days I would side more with the farmer.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
I'm a big fan. I don't like Peter Rabbit so much, but I'm a big fan of the fox in Beatrix Potter, Mr. Todd. And used to have a recurring nightmare about him. Being at a bus stop and then trying to eat me.
So you're a big fan of him, and you used to have a recurring nightmare.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. It's a strange relationship I have with these people that try and destroy me and eat me.
Very strange.
I thought the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland was one of mine.
He's an asshole.
He's anxious. I like that. It's me on a bus wherever I'm going somewhere.
Yeah,
I just have that. When he's late, I go.
No,
I can relate to that.
I thought you would have gone with maybe the March Hare, who likes to think it's tea time all the time. He's always got a cup of tea.
No, but I don't know if I like the March Hare so much or the Mad Hatter. I kind of don't rate them as
that. Like, it's not true. If you were running late and I said to you something, you'd stop and be like, "Well, I am in a bit of a rush, but I'll do what I can." That's not what he does. He's just like, "No, I'm late. No, I don't. I think he's a bit brusque. I think he's a bit. He's not polite.
I also thought of the Sexies Cadbury's Caramel Bunny.
Oh,
I thought that would have been. I thought that would have been in your list.
You hate her?
Yes, I hate her. That's like the most mainstream furry fantasy rabbit ever. I hate it. It's like, what's so sexy? It's horrible.
Isn't it funny that everyone goes on about her sexy voice and it's Miriam Margolyes?
Great
who
voice.
I love.
Oh, no, I hate it. They make my skin crawl. That's like, that to me was like, when that advert would come on, that's like watching Eurotrash with your parents and you get all embarrassed. Like, oh, stop being sexy, you bunny.
But it's so good when you know it's her. I watched a documentary that she did recently, and the opening scene was her hanging out her enormous underpants on the line, saying, "I do like a navy knicker," and they were like flags. They were flag pants. So if you picture her doing the voice,
there's ones I think that will be big for older people that we'll probably hear about in the comments, which I bet we get some mentions of Dylan from the Magic Roundabout, the hippie. Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some, and fair play to them.
I got Brer Rabbit, the classic, American kind of moral tale rabbit, but he's a good wind-up merchant. A slick operator, and I used to get those stories as a kid, and Brer Rabbit definitely has one of those kind of influence on lots of other culture, and is very significant rabbit. I reckon you could argue it's the most significant fictional rabbit.
I guess but these are things. Bad Rabbits, Jive Bunny, probably the worst rabbit.
No, not the worst.
Who is your worst rabbit?
Rabbit from Winnie the Pooh, complete asshole, horrible.
Yeah. I was glad to not see Rabbit on anyone's list.
No, Rabbit's horrible. The kids suggested Rabbit, and I was like, "Are you listening to these stories? Like Rabbit's horrible to Tigger, and you like Tigger. Rabbit's horrible to Pooh. Rabbit's sort of starts a sort of neighborhood watch to drive Tigger out of the 100-acre wood. Rabbit's horrible. I hate Rabbit. I like the way Rabbit talks. I like voicing Rabbit when I'm reading them, but yeah, it's a horrible person. I got I think Rabbit's the worst. Then Jive Bunny. And I'm not very keen on the Energizer / Duracell Bunny. I think that's lame. But a good one is Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald?
Is that the Disney Oswald?
Yeah, the Disney Oswald, the character that Disney came up with, and is very much the precursor to Mickey Mouse. But he was just doing work for hire. He didn't have the rights to Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, and he asked for more money. And Universal just said, no, in fact, we're going to offer you less money. And he went, right, well, I quit then. And he lost all of his team. He lost all of his team because they stayed on at Universal except for the one guy. And so they went off and created Mickey Mouse and went on their own. And how famous is Oswald the Lucky Rabbit now? Probably not very lucky, really, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. But if you watch those cartoons in 1927, they're really good. But they've got that same weird thing that the early Mickey ones have of like, it's like the screen is crawling. Do you know what I mean? Like there's just creatures, and there's all these bits that are on loop, you know? So they'll just be like animals crawling out of a hole, and then another, it would happen again, and just they're everywhere and sort of swarming. And it's got that early animation weirdness to it. But yeah, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit's a good one. So we send people, you can, Hayley's on the radio on, and she's on a magical web. You got your website. Is everything on your website? HayleyCampbell.com.
HayleyCampbell.com has nothing new on it in the last few years.
Does it link? It doesn't link to all the things that you're up to and
yeah, it does. Yeah.
On Twitter. She's on Twitter. Like you've come back to Twitter.
Great.
And we're going to have you back on the show with some relevant things later in the year. But we're going to do next one. We're doing one which somebody else has suggested. So definitely send us your suggestions for top fives we can do.
Do all those things you're supposed to do, like
share, and subscribe.
Do all those things.
Yeah.
Apparently it helps, but I don't know. I don't know.
And thanks, Hayley, for joining us and being our first guest. And
thank you for coming on.
Oh, so welcome.
And if people are listening to this before Easter, have a nice Easter.
Yeah.
And get yourself some chocolates.
Yeah, happy Easter.
Get the eggs in.
Get the and give praise to the bunny, which is what it's all
unless
about.
You live in the East London area, in which case stay away. There'll be plenty. Don't worry about it. There's plenty.
Yeah, wait till after. They're much cheaper then.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Right. Happy Easter. Thanks, gang.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.